I am NetMoverSitan, and we're still going through the abnormality mirror dungeon events of the first mirror dungeon. We'll start this part with the Fairy Gentleman, an aberration of the Fairy Festival abnormality. This one is a fat, globular green being with an absinthe glass. It was found in a cavern full of a mix of smells. It said that it had been a while since it had visitors, wanting to treat them. It wasn't a place for eating, as it had already had all the food. All he had was a glass of fairy wine, offering them a drink from its thick, slimy hand. If they accepted this offer, they noted that the glass stank like a mouldy shoe sprayed with air freshener, and the limbs of fairies were floating in it. It told them to help themselves. If shared with everyone, as it's rather large for one human, they all sipped their portion and they felt an unpleasant texture tingling down their throats. But otherwise it was tasty. Where all were healed by 15 HP, and those with gluttony affinity were healed by 10 SP. If only one of them drank it, the one with the lowest HP, it tasted pretty good for them, but they kept heaving, an odd bothering feeling in their throats. The fairy flesh parts were bitter. The thirst was quenched, but that was replaced with another problem. The one with the lowest HP healed for 40 HP but suffered 10 SP damage. However, if they declined its offer, it told them not to hold back. It consumed the contents in one gulp, although it gave them the glass, which still had some of the green substance inside. It's unclear what it was, although this granted the EGO gift Green Spirits, where upon damaging a non-staggered enemy using a gluttony skill, or inflicting tremor using skill effects, 4 tremor was randomly inflicted on all enemies. Ooh, the Rose Spanner identities would benefit greatly from this one. Next we have the Heavenly Executor Scribe! Based on the wings and the original's capacity to bring judgment. Yes, this is likely a White Knight aberration. Thankfully, this one is not as powerful as the original. As in White Knight, the destroyer of a wing that generated power by tapping into hell. That one is the most dangerous of all abnormalities encountered so far. Not even Baba Yaga, a kaiju-sized abnormality, is that dangerous. As for the encounter with the Heavenly Executor Scribe, it recorded right and wrong, to record the judgment of the one above. It didn't assess, as to lay down judgment was not a secretary's role, only to record it. The scribe silently presented an emerald tablet. If the sinners read it, there would be a check that favoured gluttony and pride. If successful, the tablet had unknown letters. They were unable to grasp what was on it. A few words stood out though: judgment, retribution, and punishment, along with some combination of words that might have deadly meanings to them. Yes, they might have deadly consequences. Certainly if they try to understand them. When looking back up, the scribe gave them a short nod before soaring into the sky. The Chosen would lose 10 SP and gain the Egio gift. If they failed, the tablets of unknown letters. They might have been able to understand it. It just needed more effort. A little more. A little more. And when coming back to their senses, it disappeared, and it was this situation that the sinner that was chosen was left alone with the tablet in their hands. And the Chosen lost 25 SP and still gained the Egio gift. If they decided to scrape out the letters, nothing would happen, as they used a sharp implement to scrape out the letters. It stood still, giving no response, seemingly accepting the judgment as valid. The tablet broke and eventually crumbled to dust. The Egio gift is the lithograph. Whenever an enemy is staggered, the one with the least HP heals 5% of their maximum HP. If they have gluttony skills, it heals 10% of their maximum HP instead. Now, this is good for any run, especially identities like Sunshower Heathcliff and the one who shall grip Sinclair, as losing HP is a risk with both of these to maintain the delicate balance of managing SP. Because with Sunshower Heathcliff, the lower the SP, the more effective that one is. And with N-Corp Sinclair, the attacks drain SP more, and they need to block to regain it. And when blocking, there's a risk they can receive damage. Yes, quite a delicate balance with those two. Now for the Sign of Roses, a possible aberration of the flesh idol, where if the one attending to it doesn't pray enough, they die. And if they pray too much to it, they die and release all abnormalities that can be released, along with having a number of other unpleasant experiences happen in the facility. As for the Sign of Roses, it resembles a more historically accurate crucifixion due to the trees made in the region of Judea, as it was known at that time. When encountering this, the sinners asked what the signboard said. It hung itself on a tree, trying to make its content known. It had a pitiable desperation. If they decided to pick a rose, they had a check that favoured gluttony and envy. If successful, they picked a rose out of it, and with closer examination, they noticed that it had an intestinal texture. What was the flower-shaped organ for? That much was unclear, but what was clear, it was they gained the Egio gift. And if they failed, they picked a rose out of it, and their careless removal had crushed the uniquely textured flower. And the sign showed no change. They also lost 12 SP, although they could repeat this as many times as they wanted. If they decided to unravel the brambles, it resulted in bits of flesh coming off. Ironically, what they thought was the source of pain was actually keeping it together. The body writhed as it fell apart. The blossoms of flowers on the ground were a substitute for its screams. A random non-rough ally would lose 10 HP. As for the Egio gift, that's the Crown of Roses. Yes, a likely reference to the crown of thorns that Jesus wore when he was crucified. At the start of the turn, 4 rapture is inflicted on a random enemy, and when activating the Gluttony Absolute Resonance, 2 rapture, sorry, why am I getting those two confused? Yes, 4 rupture is inflicted on a random enemy, and when activating Gluttony Absolute Resonance, 2 rupture, yes, is inflicted on all enemies at the start of the combat phase. Yes. Another one that 7 Association would benefit from. Along with any that inflicts a decent amount of rupture. Well, at least those setups that have a good amount of gluttony attacks in order to activate the resonance. Now for the Walking Pearl. This land-moving shellfish was found on a barren mudflats that reeked of salty decay. The jade-coloured seawater didn't seem to have anything in it. Then a giant clam walked before them. With each step it took, it sprayed a fetid green muck. Was this the source of the contamination, or was it working to contain the filth? If they decided to sample the green substance, a check was made that favoured gluttony and gloom. If successful, some of the slime was contained in a glass jar. It was not a simple mass of filth, as numerous hatchlings were swimming inside, all feeding on each other, possibly its offspring. And the EGO gift was gained. If it failed, if they approached with the glass jar in hand, they hesitated and they turned around. They couldn't stand the force of reaching out to contain that. They got the feeling that it's something that they shouldn't hold. And, well, the Chosen lost 10 SP. If it was approached, they waded through the virescence. With each step, the foul mud brought terrible pain to one's feet, unable to move forward. They worried that their legs would come off if they moved any further. The clam walked off into, it walked off into the distance. And in the next battle, all would be slowed by 2 at the start of the combat phase. The EGO gift for this one is Sticky Muck, where after dealing damage by using either Gluttony or a Pierce skill, 1 defense level down was inflicted on the target. I can think of a few that this would be useful for, especially if it weakened the enemy to attacks. Let's see, Rabbit Heathcliff for both, Sank Don Quixote for the Pierce and for the Gluttony, I'm thinking K-Corp Honglu. Let's move on to the Gossypian Flower. In a field of white, yet somehow dark flowers with red sky and windy bleak air. A giant flower that wouldn't be out of place near a certain plant-themed Batman villain fluttered amidst this field. It resembled a person waving from afar. If approached, a check was made, one that favoured gluttony and lust. If successful, they headed towards the giant flower. The smaller ones made way. The petals closed up as they passed, as if bowing in respect. Once arriving at the end, the giant flower drooped lower to offer a present. the EGO gift was gained. If that failed, as they approached the giant flower, the small blooming ones would scuttle and shuffle, seemingly staring in all directions. They were fearful about getting lost. The giant flower was still waving at them. Those without gluttony would lose 5 HP. The skill check can be repeated up to 3 times. And if that failed 3 times, they were unable to approach no matter how hard they tried. All they could do was gaze from a distance. They felt like waving at it, and this made the flowers all turn red, facing them. The red petals flying at them, a punishment for a half-hearted gesture. Then identities without gluttony would receive 10 HP damage, along with the 10 HP, the 5 HP from the second time it failed, and the battle would take place. If they waved back from the start, out of nostalgia, the flowers would turn red, all facing them. And after staring at them for a little, the petals would fly at them. And much the same as if the check failed 3 times, a battle would ensue. The EGO gift is White Gossipium, where at the start of the turn, if any enemies were staggered, they would become unstaggered and bleed would be inflicted on them, which is 8 plus whatever the stagger level is, plus, times 4. So for example, if it was stagger level 2, then it would be 8 plus 2 times 4, so 16. And this is not including the 2 bleed counts that would be appearing. And this would be especially useful for those that inflict bleed. So the Kurokuro clan identities, the Blade lineage identities, Rhino Missile, and Rabbit Heathcliff. Although the downside of this is there's no helpless stagger state with this gift. At least when we get to the next combat turn. Now for the Wayward Passenger. Now this one was fought in the second refraction line. A poor passenger, at first glance, that was actually a former W Corp employee, stranded between dimensions. Most never realized that they ever disappeared. Well, the transport company would know, but they simply pretended that they never existed. Lost and abandoned, thrown in the trash, no place in the city. If pointed in a direction, a check occurred that favoured gloom and sloth. If successful, it ran in the direction that it was pointed to, and it dropped something as it began to sprint. It had a wing's logo. Stories have been heard about that wing, as employees were supplied like that. An employee to a transport company. An EGO gift was gained because of that. And if it failed, while they were in contemplation, it slowly shambled their way. When pointing in a random direction out of panic, it changed course to follow that instruction. Moments later, the noise of metal plates crumpling was heard, and something else was ripping apart. Then a battle took place. If they stood still, it stared in their direction. It then shambled for them, realizing something. The sinners could tell that it was not a passenger. It was an employee based on the ID card on its chest. It approached them, preparing to go through the motions. Any that lacked gloom affinity lost 10 HP. As for the EGO gift, it was the blue Zippo lighter that granted one Gloom EGO resource along with one EGO resource of 2 other random affinities at the start of each turn. Now this is useful for gaining a steady supply of resources in case a stronger attack is needed to defend against a particularly powerful enemy attack. Its energy blades, resembling the cleanup agent's primary weapon. You can also create rifts like W Corp Singularity can do. Now we move on to something which I suspect that I have. A lost mind. In an open area, a multi-armed being was found. Sometimes the mind wondered, where does it end up? If it had a physical destination, this is where it might end up. This was an empty human-like statue, where the wandering mind would decide to settle. It extended its arms, trying to grab something. If they reached out to grab its hand, they were unable to touch it. It was an illusion, something that shouldn't be, made visible. It retracted its arms as if it understood. Then it broke itself, turning into a small statue. The EGO gift, which was granted. Although all would suffer 15 SP damage. If refused, a check would be made that favoured Gloom, Gluttony and Pride. If successful, they quickly ducked out of its path, its arms obsessively groping towards them. Fortunately, it could only reach so far and they safely escaped. If failed, they quickly ducked out of its path. It was no easy task to avoid its obsessive hands. A few of them managed to grab and scratch at them, although they managed to escape. They still suffered a lot. Any that lacked Gloom affinity lost 13 HP. As for the EGO gift, it was Phantom Pain, where skills that dealt damage to single targets dealt 15% more damage. When activating Gloom Absolute Resonance, all allies would gain 1 offensive level up at the start of the combat phase. Most of the W Corp identities, along with all the Rose Spanner identities, deal Gloom damage, so if most have a Gloom-based attack, that would certainly provide a boost to all. Although there's no guarantee that this scenario would happen. It would require some careful selection of who is sent to fight. Now for a monkey tree. In the middle of a desolate plain, there was a resentful tree. The place had an air of umbrage, with a discordant sky. One branch was growing out of it like an arm. The tree was unmoving. It seemed to want something. If water was sprinkled on it, it soon boiled away as if it was on a cast iron skillet. No noticeable change to the tree happened. The twig seemed livelier, although it was hard to tell, although there was the option to give it more water. Most of the time it would vaporize in an instant, possibly starting to absorb less. There would be a 1 in 10 chance that, if given water, it would not need to repeat this. Yes. And then the tree would appear more alive, and the foreboding aura would disappear, the age-long thirst quenched, the twig rustling and coming to them. A gift given in gratitude. the EGO gift along with healing of 30 HP and SP. However, if the twig was snapped, there would be a cacophony of dreadful screams striking their ears. It was coming from the twig, and as much as this was creeping them out, it might be worse if it was thrown away. The EGO gift was gained this way, and if this was done after watering it, a random ally that has no gloom affinity would lose 10 SP. But if it was snapped without this, all non-gloom allies would lose 9 SP. The EGO gift is the Thunder Branch, which inflicts 1 additional rupture and increases its count by 1 when inflicting rupture. So yeah, this one definitely would benefit from those that already inflict rupture, such as, well, most of the 7 association identities, along with K-Corp Honglu and R-Corp Heathcliff. Next we have the Blubbering Toad. Now this was fought in the first refraction line, one that could eat away at SP if allowed to. It was found inside a cave. Yes, this giant toad was crying. Patches of blue resin were covering that cave. It was like gloom, a sap of gloom, not quite like tears of sadness. It held this resin. If they attempted to mimic the cry, and the average SP was less than 25, then the toad made a different noise as if to answer. A reply, extending its long blue tongue, snatching a person from the group, and then walked back out of the mouth sometime later, drenched in moisture or gloom. The lowest SP individual healed until at max SP, while the lowest SP Gloom ally healed until at max HP. However, if the average SP was 25 or higher, as opposed to being less than 25, the toad's cry was dull and heavy, unable to understand. After crying that a few more times, it hopped away, leaving only sticky blue resin. If they sat and waited, after a time, the toad finished its cries, gazing into them, closing and opening its eyelids slowly, and with a quick, slick sound, a long blue tongue popped out towards them, and an eyeball belonging to it was on it. When it was picked up, it blinked its other eye at them before leaving. Was this thanks for listening to it? And this was the EGO gift, the Melty Eyeball, where 3 defense level down was inflicted on those afflicted by the Tremor Burst. Now, Rospanner Rodia and Rospanner Nasson could certainly exploit this, along with any others that can burst Tremor. Now for the abnormality Hole in the Man, where they saw a person standing in a square, looking their way, waving an arm. It had a cavity in their head that might be an eye or a bullet hole, likely the work of a revolver in its hand. It pointed the gun at them. If approached, this showed that they didn't fear the gun, even if they pulled the trigger. And it didn't matter how much this happened, the bullets would always hit the head of the one firing it. It aimed at the head and fired. The abnormality was gone, leaving an ashen coat on the floor. Its EGO gift. If they ducked and covered, thinking that it wouldn't come their way, trying to avoid it, this didn't happen, as when it aimed the gun at its head, the bullets came their way. It caused those without gloom to suffer 15 HP damage. Those with gloom healed 15 HP. The EGO gift was the Grey Coats. When using a multi-target skill with this one, 20% more damage would be dealt, and when dealing gloom damage or using a multi-target skill, 20% of that damage would also be healed to the one that did that. Now this would benefit those that used multi-target EGO, along with the Spice Bush Yi-Sang, as he has a multi-target standard attack. Well, if enough tremor was gathered. Yes, this would appear to be associated with fear, where you could either overcome it and not let it affect you, or succumb to it and let it hurt you. Yes, I know that's an oversimplistic way of putting it, but that would appear to be the case based on the results of the choices involving this one. Let's move on to Stuck in Heaven. Now, this is quite clearly an aberration of the burrowing heaven, an abnormality that branches out. Well, it looks like a tree, but isn't. It breaches when not looked at for too long, and when breaching, it can only be damaged by others when it's looked at. In a dark place, a number of eyes looks that way. What they belonged to had the appearance of a tree branch, but it also appeared human. Heaven sometimes burrows, other times it makes a home in the heart, and once taking root, that heaven will only be visible through the eyes of others. If they closed their eyes, heaven would still be there, even with this. As long as heaven was lodged in, there was no way to avert their gaze from what they didn't wish to see. They might only see what it wants them to. When eyes are closed, one's sight remained over. It would forever be impossible to close this. Yes, if they closed their eyes, this would result in its EGO gift being gained, and those that returned the gaze, staring without blinking, it didn't so much as flinch. It cared not for those that twitched in pain. They're not what the eyes are looking at, it's the heaven sometime, rather somewhere, behind them. Those without pride affinity lost 10 HP, those with it were healed by 10 HP. The EGO gift would be the Late Bloomer's Tattoo. When dealing damage with pride or a single coin skill, it would grant 1 offense and defense level up buff. The Spice Bush Yi-Sang identity, along with Sunk Don Quixote and possibly LCCB Assistant Manager Ishmael, are good ones for this, as they have some strong pride attacks. Let's talk about the Blue-ish star. Now, this is quite clearly a blue star aberration, where those that run out of SP around this one are drawn into it and killed. And it seems to rely on worship, at least when fighting it in Library of Ruina. They saw how blue this abnormality was. A pure hue of blue that allowed nothing to approach, trying to go near it, resulting in the body being pushed away, yet it was so blue. They wished to have this colour. The irresistible allure was almost tearing them apart. Moving forward makes them see blue. It's blue, they're blue, and others are blue. Then a load of gibberish was spoken. This was if they try to go near it, and any without Pride affinity lost 20 SP, and the EGO gift was gained. Those that moved backwards saw themselves as impurities. To be truly blue, the one with the true blue must be left alone in one's blueness. They were bounced off. A strange, uplifting aura shrouded them. Those without Pride affinity lost 20 HP, and they gained 30 cost. Those that decided to leave, gathering their wits and turned away, not falling for this temptation, kept their eyes away from it and forgetting that they ever saw it. The EGO gift was the lowest star, where dealing blunt damage also dealt 5 SP, or gloom damage if they're not human enemies. And if the skill affinity used to cause this blood damage was Pride, 3 more SP was dealt. Now, Lu association identities would benefit from this, along with K-Corp Hong Lu, yes, and as I said, they only lose SP if they're human enemies. Abnormalities or distortions that lack intelligence of their own would suffer gloom damage instead. Let's move on to the Spider of Marriage. They encountered a spider's nest made of thorny vines, filled with flowers, possibly intended as a celebration. The bud filled with blood. And this blood came from the bride and groom, which were attached to each other, crawling between them. As they scuttled around, blood seeped from their hands and feet. They changed sides to stop each other from losing too much blood. If the sinners plucked a blood-soaked flower, it expressed joy. Congratulatory flowers acting as a curse, preventing them from leaving the nest. Not planted or raised by the couple, the petals were feeding on someone's naivete. Any without Pride affinity lost 5 HP. Those with it were healed by 15 HP and gained the EGO gift. However, if they tried to remove the brambles, it screamed when the vine was torn out. It was their home, as much as it hurt them. It detested those that ruined it. It was unwise to approach the ache so badly. All would lose 10 SP for that. Well, if this happened, there was also a 50% chance that when they tried to remove the vines, they were tougher than they looked. A few tugs later, only scratches on the palms happened. They quietly watched this. They were upset, or afraid in some way. And they would lose 10 SP regardless. As for the EGO gift, it was prejudice, where at the start of the third turn, the one with the least HP would be healed by 15% of their maximum HP, and when activating Pride Absolute Resonance, the one with the least HP would be healed 10% of their maximum HP at the start of the combat phase. Yes, it would be good to have Spice Bush Yisang, Sunk, Don Quixote, LCCB Ishmael, along with any others that have, well, at least decent Pride affinity attacks, in order to activate this. Now for the Steam Transport Machine. This was fought in the second refraction line, and a possible aberration of the backwards clock, due to both having a steampunk aesthetic. They saw that it carried heavy objects without a word. As it worked, the number on its electronic display seemed to update. Machines exist for a purpose. The sinners felt that they should give it an order. If ordered to carry luggage, a check is made that favoured envy, gluttony and sloth. If successful, it lifted a nearby object to carry it from left to right. The count on its body went up by 1. Just as they wondered if that was it, the machine replaced one of its tubes with a new one, presenting the old one to them, and they accepted. This was the EGO gift that was granted. If it failed, it would lift the nearby object to carry it from right to left. While it was moving it, it suddenly came to a halt. The tube flickered after flashing random letters and numbers, and then everything shut off. With the power gone, the object slipped from its hands and fell. A few of them were standing in the impact zone. 3 random allies lost 15 HP. And if it was ordered to do nothing, without purpose, the meaning of its existence wasn't there, even if it was functional. If the purpose was to do nothing, it would do what it could to achieve that directive. Then a loud boiling noise came from the machine's body as it began to heat, expelling hot steam. It was glowing a dangerous hue, so they quickly escaped the room. The EGO gift was Nixie Divergence, where, at the start of the battle, 4 tremor with 4 counts was inflicted on all enemies. 2 tremor was inflicted when dealing damage with an envy skill. Oh yes. And they're actually Nixie tubes, not vacuum tubes. Yes, I'm not sure why they had a difference. Or why they couldn't tell the difference. Might be a mistake on Project Moon's part, but okay, let's move on. Let's continue this with the Dreaming Electric Sheep. Ah yes, a possible reference to the short story Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, which would be adapted into Blade Runner. They encounter a dark cityscape with well-lit buildings. They appear to be powered by the mass buzzing cloud at the centre. The cloud had a head and 2 pairs of legs, resembling a sheep. The electric sheep seemed to be in pain. Is it being siphoned of its power? If they cut the cables, the buildings blacked out in an instant. The electric sheep dashed off into the distance with a thunderous cry. In the unlit town, weeps of the lightless filled the air. The EGO gift rested where the electric sheep was. If another cable was plugged into it, it bleated and screamed. As its distressed screech shaked the air, flashes of light hit the eyes. The buildings were brighter than ever. The light from the creature's cloud was dimming. Could it be dreaming? It closed its eyes after it fell silent, and all without envy, Affinity lost 15 SP. The EGO gift was the Dreaming Electric Sheep, where 2/power up for 2 turns was granted after defeating an enemy with either envy or / damage. And when activating Envy Absolute Resonance, 1 offensive and 1 defensive level up would be applied to all allies at the start of the combat phase. Yes. Rabbit Heathcliff and Rose Spanner Rodia would find this useful, along with, well, pretty much any identity that has / and or envy affinity attacks. Now for the Shock Centipede. First thoughts in the Fathoms of Ego of Yi Sang. It was also fought in the Mirror Dungeon, and also encountered in one. In the encounter, there was a sign that said, "This centipede is capable of discharging a high voltage." That's what the sign on the tank said in that corridor. Was this an aquarium or a laboratory? The segments of the creature sparked each time they moved, suggesting faulty connections. There was 2 buttons on the tank, one shaped like a thunderbolt, the other like a water drop. Pressing the lightning button applied the stimulation and pain to the centipede to increase the discharge intensity. The mechanical sound played for a short time. Then the EGO gift dropped from the sheet below, and the centipede stopped moving. Pressing the droplets button results in a check that favors envy and wrath. If successful, pressing the droplet-shaped button would apply stimulation and pain to the centipede to increase discharge intensity, which filled the tank with water. The centipede twisted its body as if some sort of dance was happening. It didn't seem to be out of joy. In fact, it looked painful. This resulted in the speed of everyone increasing by 1 for the next battle. Failing this check, however, when this button was pressed and the dance happened, it scratched the tank's surface. The glass cracked and fell apart immediately afterwards, and the electrified water fell right on their heads, resulting in non-envy allies losing both 15 HP and 15 SP. The EGO gift is the standard duty battery, which inflicted 3 rapture when dealing damage, and an additional 2 rapture was inflicted if it was an envy attack. Yes. 7 association identities along with Rabbit Heathcliff, Rospanner Rodia. Let's see who else. Rospanner Gregor might make use of this one as well. Now for the more unusually named KQE-1J-23. What this was encountered in was a dark place that might be a factory. A sharp mechanical noise zipped through the air. A robot slowly approached. It appeared to be incomplete due to the bare wires protruding with each movement. The leakage could be antifreeze or it could be blood. Its terminal on its chest flashed to life. Something could be written. If goodbye was written, the terminal's light would go red and warnings would start to blare. It would shake as if in pain. It would repeat farewell with increasing rapidity. Then it exploded into bits of metal and gore. Any that lacked envy would suffer 15 HP and 15 SP damage. If hello was typed in, the robot would lift both of its arms with some struggle. The terminal would print out, "Welcome, dear guest. Have you enjoyed the town tour? We would like you to have a souvenir." The smile emoticon was on the terminal, but its gestures were a plea for help, asking, well, yes, after receiving the souvenir, there is the option to ask for an explanation of the town, resulting in confusion. Asking if they didn't take the tour of the town. If leaving without answering, nothing happens. If told that they took the tour, it believes that there was an issue with the tour program. It stood still for a while, and then the terminal flashed. No response after multiple requests to the administrator. System error. System error. Rebooting. Then the blue screen of death appeared, and then 40 cost was given. If the truth was confessed, it told them that they may not have the souvenir. A mechanical arm tried to take it back, asking for their cooperation. Lying is bad behavior, threatening them to be punished according to Rule A62GBFE1. After repeated attempts to get the souvenir back, they hurriedly made an escape to flee from its rampage. This provided 2 more speed at the start of the next battle. As for the souvenir, it was the EGO gift, Pinpoint Logic Circuits, which deals burn by half of the skill's total coins when dealing damage using Envy or burn. Yeah, now this is definitely one for Lu Association identities, especially with Lu Association Ishmael, as her most powerful attack is Envy Affinity. That and the one who shall grip, or N-Corp Sinclair, as he does burn as well. And finally, for this mirror dungeon, is Will You Play? Now, this is a possible Letitia aberration, as it involves what looks like a girl with a hidden danger. With Letitia, she wanted to give gifts, which involved spiders that ended up killing the ones that she gave it to. Now, Will You Play is the kind of girl that's so creepy Wednesday Addams would want to be friends with her. She tells the sinners that this is her turf. There they play by her rules, or else. Yeah, dire consequences for those that break the rules. She decided to play rock, paper, scissors. Playing rock would beat her scissors, but it turned out that her rules involved you not beating her, and breaking that rule resulted in them losing. So she morphed one of her arms into a massive pair of scissors, which chopped the arm off the one playing. Any that lacked Envy affinity lost 12 HP. Those that had affinity healed for 15 HP. Those that play scissors drew. But this upset her, as this hinted that they didn't trust her, which rang in their ears and their surroundings shifted. If they chose paper and played along, it went sulkily that they won, as scissors are only useful when cloth was around. It then placed a small puppet in their hands as a reward. A prize dolly made with scissors and cloth. This was the Voodoo Doll EGO gift, which dealt 3 damage to all enemies each turn, and enemies with 33% max HP or less were inflicted with 1 attack power down. Next video we shall move on to the abnormality encounters in the second mirror dungeon. Until next time, hail the rabbit!